Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 75 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have a chat with Carolyn Arnold, who's an international best-selling and award-winning author, as well as a speaker, a teacher, and an inspirational mentor. She has 4 continuing fiction series: Detective Madison Knight, Brandon Fisher FBI, McKinley Mysteries, and Matthew Connor Adventures, and she's written nearly 30 books. Her genre diversity offers her readers everything from cozy to hard-boiled mysteries and thrillers to action adventures. Both her Female Detective and FBI Profiler series have been praised by those in law enforcement as being accurate and entertaining, leading her to adopt the trademark Police Procedurals, respected by law enforcement. I have a chat with Carolyn and her husband George, who works in partnership with her on their writing and publishing business. But before we get into the interview, I'm going to do a brief personal update and, of course, give you a word from this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is an author-friendly company who are there to provide the opportunity for authors to either get their audiobooks produced if you're looking for a narrator, or if you already have the rights and the audio file ready to go, a place for you to distribute your audiobooks to the widest global audience of retailers and libraries. You can set your own price for 98% of the markets out there and control them the way that indie authors like to control the price and have control over their books. The philosophy behind Findaway Voices is giving the voice back to the author community. And you can learn more about Findaway Voices at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. In terms of a personal update, as I mentioned in the previous episode, I'm in Oklahoma City this week. I've been here all week. I got in on Sunday, and I fly back home the following Sunday. And I'm here to spend a week in the office with the wonderful folks at Draft to Digital. It's great for me to connect with them in person. Yeah, we have video meetings all the time, but very similar to the way that I talk to writers about it. Yeah, it's great. You can listen to podcasts and you can do online videos and web courses, and those are fantastic, and they're great time-saving opportunities, but there's nothing like connecting with people in person. So I'm taking advantage of the fact that I can just walk over and chat with someone. And it's come in handy so many times this week. I mean, there's a lot of things going on or surprises that hit us. And it's so much easier for me to just get up from my desk and walk over and talk to somebody else about it rather than reach out to them on Slack and see if they want to do a video chat or whatever. And even just sitting in the boardroom and some of the meetings that I've had with some of our partners have been amazing because, you can have a few of us sitting in a room together and then video conferencing with a few other people in another room somewhere else. So ironically, in person to have a virtual chat with other people. But it's been a great experience for me and I'm really enjoying it. Interestingly enough, I mentioned in the previous episode how the musician and actress Alicia Witt helped me in proposing to my girlfriend, now fiancée Liz, at her show in Toronto. And she was on a tour, basically a 19-city tour in 26 days or something like that. And interestingly enough, she was coming through Oklahoma. And so on Tuesday night, I got tickets to go see the show. And because it was in a part of town I'd never been to before, I ended up getting there super early. I wasn't sure how long it would take for the Uber, so I Ubered up to a really great pizza place. Had some pizza and beer, and then walked over to the venue, and it was unlocked. And as I walked in, Alicia's there setting up her swag table. And on this tour, it's just her and her drummer, Lemuel. And and she's setting that up, and they just finished their sound check. They hadn't eaten yet, and again, there was nobody there to really manage swag table, etc. So I got there early with a couple of other fans who were there early, and we volunteered to help sell the swag so she could actually go and eat or do the meet and greet and stuff like that. So I ended up taking on the role of doorman, checking tickets as well. There was the organizer was there, but he was also helping orchestrate like the food delivery and stuff like that. And so as people started to show up, I was checking their tickets, getting everyone lined up, and then Alicia was doing the meet and greet. She's very personable, very much wants to engage with people and chat with them. So I even had to go and remind her, okay, the food's been here for half an hour now. It's getting cold. You need to eat before you go on stage. So not quite the bouncer, but it was kind of fun to be behind the scenes, helping sell the swag and also orchestrating the tour. It was a lot of fun. The venue was at a place called the Blue Door in Oklahoma City. And it's a phenomenal venue. Greg, who's the owner, is very, unpretentious in every way. Does a great job for 25 years. He brings in musical acts that he loves and adores. Now, Alicia's one of those performers that he always has back, and it's such an amazingly intimate venue. I mean, there's no backstage. You go in and there's a small house with maybe room for 50, 60 chairs. Something like that. I didn't count, but it was a relatively small, intimate venue. And, the performers just walk straight up the aisle, right in the middle of the crowd. And it's pretty much a place where if you enjoy music and you enjoy seeing indie bands performing and you want to actually engage in a really intimate way with them, it's phenomenal. And again, in parallel with the concept of enjoying things digitally or online, and then the difference of actually enjoying them in person. And that was a really fun experience. It was cute because Liz texted me and she says, do you think Alicia's going to think you're stalking her? Which I kind of got a kick. So like, no, I think Alicia knows I'm kind of taken and I'm kind of head over heels with someone else. But it was a really great experience. I had a chance to chat with them about life on the road, in touring and as they were packing up and I was chatting as they're packing up the van to drive to the next city. They were heading to Dallas after that. It was pretty much they finish the show, they get in the vehicle, and they're on to the next town, and sometimes not even staying in town. Sometimes it's just in and out, so they could get on to the next venue. And as a person who goes and speaks at a lot of conferences and is on the road a lot and staying in hotels, I understand part of that. But even on some of the trips where I've gone back-to-back trips to different conferences, it has never been that intense. So something I really respect and admire. But again, a wonderful experience. The other thing I've been sort of thinking about is in this last week, there's been a lot of hoopla and anger and frustration over, what's happened on Game of Thrones. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I haven't watched the show, and I'm not saying this is in a snarky sort of, I don't care about the show. I just haven't watched it. And in maybe in the same way that I binge watched Breaking Bad after the show completely finished, I'll probably binge watch Game of Thrones. It sounds like, a very fascinating story, George Martin, great fantasy, epic fantasy tale. And so, although I don't know what's happened, everyone has been up in arms about obviously some sort of massive death, slaughter, whatever. I have a vague idea of what happened, but the thing that I'm keen in on is, and it was an article from geek.com, is the fact that there are fans who are so upset, so invested in this fictional world that somebody has created, that they're starting a petition to get them to change Season 8. They want to just go back and redo Season 8. And when I look at that, I'm impressed and in awe because a writer or script writers, or however they put that together, created characters in a universe and a storyline that people are so deeply emotionally invested in that they're actually spending real world time and effort, arguing, fighting, signing petitions, because they feel that this story is theirs. They feel that deeply ingrained and invested in what's happening in this completely fictional world with completely fictional characters. It's affecting their lives. That, to me, is the sign of really incredibly powerful and intense storytelling. And that's the kind of storytelling that writers should be striving for, is that a writer can put down their book or finish their story and think about it and reflect on it and feel connected with these people who do not exist. That is powerful storytelling. And, say what you want about Game of Thrones, but I honestly believe that this is evidence of incredible, powerful storytelling, something that we probably all would love for our fans to be that passionate about the things that happen in this fictional world. Well, that's it for the introductory chatter for this podcast. Let's move on to this fascinating chat with Carolyn and George Arnold. Hey, Carolyn. Hey, George. Thank you so much for hanging out with me here today.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
So you guys are a unique collaborative team. Carolyn is the creative talent behind so many different books, which we're going to get into. And George is basically the publisher who handles a lot of the logistics and the marketing, etc. How long have you guys been collaborating in this way?
I'd say probably a few years now.
Okay.
So George has been working with me full-time for a couple of years. I quit my day job in 2014.
Okay.
In 2016. But say about a year before that, he was helping me more and more earnest to format and redesign covers, remarket covers, that type of thing. But right from the beginning of my publishing, he's always designed my covers.
Okay. So he's a talented designer to begin with.
Yes.
Yeah, I had 25 years experience as a designer for another company, but it was more signage and vehicle related rather than books. But I just took the knowledge I'd learned from those years and that avenue and put it towards cover design.
Okay. So what's the main difference between designing for signs, etc., and then designing for book covers?
Simplicity. On a vehicle, you can have a lot more landscape of places for people to read things.
Okay.
Whereas book cover, you need to get the point across in 10 seconds or less.
Okay.
Because people are going to look at that cover and they're going to judge that book by that cover, and you got to hook them within that first 10 seconds they're looking at that cover.
Okay. Excellent. Now, Carolyn, you said that it was like 2014 that you started to, was that when you left the day job, or that's when you started to get serious into writing?
I seriously got into writing in 2006.
Okay.
I had been away from writing for 13 years prior to that. I used to write as a teenager.
Okay.
And I was at a job for a bigger company, and they were restructuring. So we all sort of knew in our department that we were going to be getting the boot any day, but we didn't know when. And so we weren't very inspired or motivated to work.
Right.
So I was friends with the front receptionist, and we'd have lunch together often, whatever. But near the end of one day, she emails me just sort of out of the blue and says, "Tell me a story." Well, I just fired back a few paragraphs to her, and she's like, "More." And so we did this 2 or 3 times. I'm just going from the top of my head, writing a story. And I hadn't written for 13 years. And she's like, "You have to finish this." So then that became my first full-length book. It took me a year to complete it. But my life changed from that day forward. It's always been about writing since then. That was June 2006.
And so, I mean, you've got 3 mystery police detective FBI sort of procedural, some mysteries, an adventure series as well. Lots of darkness, lots of murder, lots of intrigue. What drew you to the dark corners of writing?
Maybe just to get my dark tendencies out in a legal way.
Okay.
It's lots messy on paper. I don't know. I guess it's like writing's therapy, right? You've heard that said, I'm sure, before.
Right.
And it's just sort of a way to explore different facets of the human mind, I feel. Like you get into characters, you get into the minds of serial killers, like in my Brandon Fisher series. you try to have like a little understanding, basically.
Okay.
Not obviously an acceptance of this, but you know what I mean, a little understanding into the psyche of these people.
Okay. And I have to ask, when you pen a mystery or thriller, do you always know the murder or the ending? Is that something that's always known in advance, or is that something that you discover along the way?
It's rarely known in advance. So yeah, I investigate with my investigators.
Oh, okay. So you're figuring it out with them. Okay.
Yeah. So it involves a little more heavy lifting on the other end with editing and that kind of thing, but it's a fun process. It's like magic is what I call it.
Oh, excellent. And it seems like you guys have magic between the two of you in terms of the way you've divided it. So you got into it, starting getting into it full time, 2014. Or George with a background in design. How did that happen? So you started with covers, and then what was the next step? And how did you guys realize that you were also going to do this full time? Because that's a pretty awesome thing.
Well, that was sort of my intention from the start, to write full time, right? Most authors are like, they have that dream and it feels like a pipe dream, right? But I just really kept it solid in mind that was my intention, was to write full time, and I was fortunate enough to realize that, manifest.
Okay.
And with George.
Yeah, it became the part where the 1 year Carolyn wrote 10 books. And because she was writing so much, she didn't have time to do the formatting of the books.
Okay.
So she kind of asked me to step in, and I know the Adobe family of software quite well, so I learned one of the Adobe software platforms to be able to do the formatting
in design
and started to format the books for her so that I could take that off of her plate so she could keep writing. So once I got into the formatting side of it and doing it for the EPUBs and the Mobies and the different print versions, and that started to take up a little bit more time than just doing cover designs, which they take their own time, but the formatting, to get it to look as professional as possible and have it a consistent look across all platforms, that's what takes the time.
Okay.
I think he was ready for a change too from what he was doing before, because he had been in it for 25 years or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Working in the graphic industry for like signage and vehicles and stuff like that. So
okay. So
he was ready for a switch.
You guys both work from home now, obviously.
Yeah.
So do you have separate offices? Like, is this the marketing and production and logistics office, and this is the creative suite, or how do you divide that up?
Well, the funny part is, like you mentioned, I'm the creative, but I have to say he's creative too. So it's just different ways, right?
Yeah.
For say the first 6 months or a year. Okay, we were both in one room, our second bedroom.
Okay.
That we could turn into an office for me when I quit my day job. And so there were two of us crammed in here. Well, where I sit, I could see George's monitor. So I'd be like, "What are you doing, George? What are you doing now, George?" Micromanaging him, so it would drive him nuts. And then I was having a harder time, focusing on my books and getting into my world with him just like right there. And he couldn't stand the clickety, clickety, clickety. So one day, like, "I don't know how to say this, honey, but you got to move out." So he got the boot to the main level. So he's set up down there now with a nice office space. And
when she's writing those 10,000 word days, that's a lot of clicking.
Yeah. And the noise canceling headphones just don't do the trick even.
No, they weren't doing the trick enough.
So I'm glad you mentioned, George is creative as well, in a different way, right, in terms of the stuff that he does. And I think one of the creative things that I've seen you guys do is the creativity in marketing, because it's not just the cover and the blurb, it is the strategy and the planning and the keywords and all of and again, a wonderful combination of creativity and analytics. George, I've seen you do in-depth analytics. And so what I'm really, really curious is, we always think of it as beginning with the book and the story and the detectives and all the mystery and the intrigue, and then leading to the marketing of it, et cetera. But because you guys are together all the time, does that cross over? Does the marketing sometimes inform something about the book itself, or do you keep that separate?
Oh, I write the book and then we talk marketing.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes there's certain things in the headlines that inspire ideas for Carolyn's writing, but
Like
and there's times that we'll sit around and we'll spitball ideas of what the killer could do and how they could do it, and we have those fun little sessions where we'll just sit around and talk for an hour or two, and just it becomes real fun.
Yeah, so like in my novel, In the Line of Duty, it just so happened that around that time, and I had written it before, but it just became really sort of a hot issue in the media about police brutality, and people were uprising against police and all of this sort of thing, and police were getting a really bad rep.
Okay.
My book, In the Line of Duty, I have, obviously, if you look at what I write, I have a very high respect for law enforcement. So with that book, I wanted to show the human side of policing, that they're people just like us. And society either tends to raise them up on this pedestal, like, you know, they can't do no wrong, but they're people as well. And there's going to be, say, corrupt people in any organization. It's not, we can never make a foul swoop about anything.
Right.
So that one's really my heart.
Would that be a good novel for people who haven't read your work to get into your universes?
Would it be?
Yeah, would that be a good first book for people to check out?
I say it's the one nearest and dearest to my heart because of the message in it.
Right.
It's hard to choose one of your babies to say start here.
Yeah, of course.
That book is very emotional.
Yeah.
Right.
I have people write and tell me that they just, you know, in tears and that at it. So
because there is a whole
the funeral
In the Line of Duty funeral
Right.
chapter that is quite emotional.
Okay.
And, Carolyn had done a lot of research to make sure that the procedures and everything that would be taken on in that funeral were accurate.
And not only that, the entire book was actually Madison Knight, as the series goes along a bit, she has a love interest in a SWAT leader.
Okay.
So I didn't know a whole bunch about the SWAT aspect. So I wanted him to have a bigger role in this book, In the Line of Duty. So I actually reached out to somebody who was a contact of mine, and he actually works in that. He works in ERT and SWAT. So he read the whole book and he marked up different things and said, oh, this isn't accurate, or this isn't how, or this is how you should do it. So it was really informative that way.
Okay, that's cool. And that's the thing is, your books have been touted by law enforcement as accurate and entertaining. So the wonderful balance between the two. But that you have the trademark, police procedurals respected by law enforcement. So you talked about reaching out to SWAT or emergency response team. What other sort of communications do you have with those who know, who can help you shape the story?
Well, when we were trying to sort of sit down and figure out a brand for myself, something that would sort of sum me up, we came up with the two lines being whatever your taste in mysteries, it's covered and more.
Yes.
Cover my action adventure series and whatever I may feel, you know, inclined to write in the future. But with the police procedurals respected by law enforcement, it came about because I had received a lot of emails over the years from actual law enforcement officers, either currently in the field or retired, who emailed, you know, well, this character describes me to a T, or the procedures in this book were spot on, like, and I get a lot of those emails. So it's like, that's how we came up with that brand.
Okay. So when I remember I was talking to Peter James a few years ago, and he said that he had a constable reach out to him to talk about how he enjoyed one of his books, and then that person became sort of an assistant or a companion who he could bounce ideas off of and say, would this be accurate? I mean, because you've heard from so many, is that something that you can do and say, hey, your specialty is this. Can I ask you a few more questions? Yeah.
I have a spreadsheet with different people in it. So, and I have like contacts in forensics. I have contacts in the FBI, contacts obviously in the police department. And the cool part about the universe and the law of attraction, I'm going to preach here a little. But I was working on remnants, and there's body parts that float down the river and remnants. So there's like different body parts. So I never really had to work through autopsies on a body part, or what would they do? How would they approach it differently? So we weren't talking skeletons, we were talking still with flesh. And it just so happened right around that time when I'm going, I really need a coroner contact, that this woman reaches out to me and she's like, I really loved your book, Sacrifice. And if you need anything, have any questions, I used to be and didn't it turn out that not only was she a coroner in the past, but she also worked in the same county where I based Remnants.
Oh, wow. That was fortuitous.
No, it was really, it's like wonderful.
So she knew the exact facility the autopsies would be done in, everything.
The organizational structure.
Oh, that's fantastic. That was serendipity right there.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
So speaking of connections, you have connections with law enforcement, and obviously that respect your work and also assist with accuracy, ongoing accuracy. But you also have a really deep connection with your fans. You have a very engaged fan base, and what do you attribute that to? Is it the newsletter, the blog? Like how did you curate that?
Oh, that would have been it's not an overnight thing, that's for sure, for writers watching this. It's something that's built up over time as a platform, like you just build on top of it. So it started with, I believe, a blog that I started that was my writing journey. So I just started documenting, the different progresses and things I was learning. And my first readers, I would say, were actually other writers. And I was really supportive of the writing community, and I do celebrating authors and interview other authors and everything like that. So that really became my base. And as I've grown too, I really believe that the newsletter subscribers that you have, like those are your diamonds. Or
those are your core reading fan group.
Yeah, they want to hear from you, and so you have to treat them good. Email them often, but email them informative, like something that's they're going to find interesting. I don't spam them. I email them with content, or I give them free samples that are extended or free books, and try to keep it interesting and different so that, they want to open the email and they don't go, oh, it's another advertisement.
Yeah. Don't just be buy my book. You want it to be something that is a gem that they're getting that isn't available to everybody else.
Okay.
So some little things that you're providing to them that is the background behind the stories that not everybody knows.
And that's something that those fans they crave. They want more, right? They want to go back into the universe. They want to dig deeper. They're not satisfied with just the. It was okay. The novel's done. When's your next one coming out? What else? What else do we have here? So you've got a number of different series that you write. What decides for you which series to work on next? I mean, how do you balance that? Because you must have fans that can't wait for the next Brandon Fisher or the next Madison Knight or the next McKinley. How do you make sure that they're all fed properly?
I guess at the end of the day, there's one me, and I can only effectively work on like one book at a time. I'm trying to get more in a routine. Ideally, the routine, and it hasn't fully evolved yet, would be to work on writing a book in the morning and editing a book from another series in the afternoon. But I haven't quite got there yet. But I try to basically alternate them, So Madison Knight just recently came out. So right now I'm working on a Brandon Fisher.
Okay.
And then after Brandon Fisher, I plan to work on a Matthew Connor action adventure.
Okay.
There's a little more space between those books, but I find them a little more challenging to write because I'm more logic-based, chronological procedures. I love that, right? And the structure that you have with solving murder. Whereas with an action adventure, you know what? A lot of this can just be, right? Because who knows if it really is. You're playing with imagination.
Yeah.
Right.
So you obviously have some base in reality, but when it comes to like the actual treasure, like a city of gold, sure, it could be out there in the jungle to be found, but maybe it's not.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? And you got to imagine, okay, well, what am I going to have this area look like and all this? So it's takes me a little bit more effort to go into that side. Like when I wrote City of Gold, I thought I had to find the City of Gold before I could write City of Gold. Do you remember that?
And there was mountains of research that went into
like myths and legends on it.
The actual people that supposedly built the City of Gold and their culture and understanding their religions and their deities, because that plays a key role usually in an action adventure. having little bits and tidbits that you can give people that are accurate history to lend credibility to the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like with my action adventures, it's more like a modern day Indiana Jones.
Right.
I don't weigh down the readers with, you're starting way back in time and then you come to present day. I started with like a group, there's 3 best friends and they're all like in their 30s and they go out and they find treasure together. Right? They all come from different backgrounds. One's a photographer, one's a museum curator, and then the main guy, Matthew Connor, is actually an archaeologist.
Okay. Cool. So you're a Canadian author, and you're an international bestseller. And I've noticed that. So, for example, when you think of like Brandon Fisher, the FBI series, it's not RCMP, which is Canadian higher level of law enforcement, but it's FBI. I mean, you obviously purposely, strategically set them in the U.S. or in rather than in local territories that you're familiar with.
Right now, it's the main part is most of my reader base is American.
Right.
So I even use American English, which to Canadian English is almost like learning a second language. Like it's either runner, what is it? Runners,
Running
they
shoes
don't
or
know,
sneakers.
or, yeah, one
Sneakers,
of them
yeah.
they don't. Yeah, and it's like a whole other lingo. And my editors will sometimes say, because they're American, and they'll be like, "Is this a Canadian saying?"
What is this poutine you speak of?
Right. So now I do try to get some more Canadian in. With my action adventure, I base them out of Toronto.
Oh, are they? Okay, those ones are based in Toronto. Okay.
So she actually, the curator works out of the Royal Ontario Museum there in Toronto.
Oh, fantastic. Of course.
I forget the neighborhood name now, but they live in a really prestigious place there, and the father's actually the mayor of Toronto.
Oh, cool. All right.
And then I just started, I haven't announced this anywhere yet, and I'm not going to say too much as far as spoilers, but I started a new series. I wrote a book, and I plan on it being a new series. And the character, and see how they're so real to me. She's a 911 dispatcher in Toronto.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. And I guess Toronto's a well enough known city. I think that folks in the U.S. have actually probably heard of it.
Exactly. That's what I figured. And I thought it'll be, I don't know if safe is the right word, but a good choice just to get some Canadian in there. And I love Toronto.
Excellent. So we are recording this in early May, and you have just launched the latest Detective Madison Knight book, Shades of Justice. It just hit and has done exceptionally well. Congratulations. There it is. Oh, yeah, excellent. If you're watching the video, there's beautiful book. This project or the way that you launch books is you do write many books, and you've got different series, but it's not just finish the book and pop it out. You guys behave more like a traditional publisher in terms of your long-term strategy and planning. I mean, I think I first learned that you were planning Shades of Justice, was it in the fall?
I think so.
Yeah, so you were planning this in the fall of 2018 for a spring launch, which is very much on par with what a major publisher would do. I'm curious as to that approach and how you manage that.
Well, part of that approach came about because it was getting too stressful the other way. So as soon as like Amazon allows most independent publishers to set up a pre-order for 3 months out. Whereas like Draft to Digital, right, you allow, I think, 2 years out. But with them, and it's like, you got to take advantage of that. But what was happening was I was still in the editing process.
Okay.
And the month before release. Well, in order to get reviewers, even bloggers or anyone, you have to at least give them a month and a half. And I mean, if you're wanting to get into magazines or even approach magazines, you got to be even further, 4 to 6
Publishers
months.
Weekly or any of those ones, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it just got to the point where it was like, oh my goodness, okay, George, you have here's the final file, get it up, formatted, get it uploaded before, the pre-order day hits.
Yeah, and before the 7-day cutoff period where you're not allowed to upload it.
Right, and before I think it used to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
So this way, when we set it up, we try to go out 3 months or full 3 months. And by that point when he's doing it, typically that book is done like final.
Right. Okay.
when he uploads it. Now I say basically final because I'll usually go through it again, right? Or if I find little things or things come back from early reviewers or something, or they find it, then we fix it. But it's mostly finished, and there's a lot less stress that way.
That way, when we put the arcs to the arc readers,
They're in really good shape.
it's as close to a finished product as possible,
Right.
and they're getting the best experience when reading the book as well. And like any book, you're going to find people find things, and the nice thing is that the arc readers will send us a note and say, I found this or this, and then it gives us the opportunity to make those changes before it
right.
live to the public.
And you produce a paperback arc as well for some of the readers? Are some of the readers diehard print enthusiasts, or are they okay with?
We usually send out the print arcs just due to the logistics of it, because we use a print-on-demand service. So by the time we get the books up there and then have to send them out, they might be 2 weeks before they actually see the book.
Right.
And most of them, it's always e-arcs.
Okay. So you send them a EPUB, a Mobi, a PDF. How do they? Is that the format?
Just a book funnel.
And we just have them sent to them through
book funnel. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You can download them easily and then get them onto their devices.
Oh, excellent. So, how has the response to Shades of Justice been? It's just been a few days since it's launched.
I'm loving the reviews that are coming in for it. People are saying like they're hooked from the beginning. They're turning the pages. I love the comments that come back about Madison Knight, like basically like she's girl power, like woman power. And I love hearing that. Like one quote specifically that I made like a little quote card for was that she's empowering to women. Like that's fantastic to hear that that's getting across in my, getting across from my book.
That's fantastic.
I love that message.
Yeah. And so Shades of Justice is about a double homicide. Can you just give us a bit of a teaser about this book?
Sure.
Now that you mentioned it.
Actually, speaking of, I'm going to get off topic because I'm an author. I had to tell someone. It was influenced actually by a murder case in Toronto, was what influenced this book.
Okay.
But anyway, about the book itself, there's a double homicide, and one of the victims is a John Doe, but the other one is a wife of a man who's pretty prestigious in the community and the largest contributor to the police department in the area. So these two are actually found naked together in the home of the wife and the husband. So the sergeant is all about, preserving his contributor to the Skiles PD.
Right.
Madison's about finding the truth, no matter what she digs up, no matter what skeletons she finds in closets, to use a cliche. So what she has to do then is she really has to learn how to look at the case and the evidence without prejudice, and be courageous enough that she can stand up to the brass and be like, you know what, I have to pursue this angle. It just has to be treated like any other case, no matter who this man is.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you said that was inspired by a murder that happened in Toronto?
The Sherman murders.
The double
homicide, and they were found in their home. A pharmaceutical billionaire. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, we'll probably include a link to that in the show notes for our American listeners who may not have heard that there's actually murders outside of their country.
And good old Canada.
And the last question. So, I mean, you do paperbacks, you do ebooks, but you also have a number of audiobooks. What's the process, and how do you decide what books get turned into audiobooks?
Well, we're just sort of dipping our toes into that right now. So we had one come out a little bit ago in the Line of Duty we did right away. It was obviously near and dear to my heart. So that was when we first took that leap into audiobooks, and then we've been away from it, but we recently been getting back to it. We have City of Gold now. We have The Secret of the Lost Pharaoh being made as we speak. 11 is in the works. Remnants was just done.
And the same narrator is now doing 11.
And we'll get him to do
we're going to get him to do the whole series.
Okay, that's nice.
As we progress, since that's the goal, is to just, after 11's done, we'll give them Silent Graves and then Defenseless, and just carry right on through and start at the very beginning. We're going to try and do the same thing with the Madison Knight series. We got to find the narrator we want to use for that one to start from the beginning of ties and work forward.
And I imagine Madison Knight, that's probably going to be a female narrator, I imagine you're looking for.
Absolutely, yeah.
That makes sense,
Well,
yeah.
we have a narrator for In the Line of Duty. She was a woman, and she was fantastic. So
Yeah, excellent.
either you're getting her again or go another way.
Okay,
But it'll
cool.
be a woman.
Excellent. And so you had mentioned that Brandon Fisher's next. That's what you're working on now?
Yes.
Or is it? Okay, cool. Excellent. And you have written some standalones. And how did the standalones come? Was it an idea you had that just didn't fit in one of your universes, or were they prior to starting to write series?
I have one standalone novel, and it sort of came in between writing the series.
Okay.
So,
Just
like
an
different
itch you had to
stories.
scratch?
What's that?
An itch that you had to scratch?
That's right. And it was like one of those things. I was trying to write and formulate the story one way when I was sort of thinking about it, and I was totally getting writer block.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, this isn't. So in this case, with assassination of a dignitary, I'll give you a little background on it. I kept thinking that he was the good guy. As soon as I sort of like just released it, the story, and this is going to sound funny, but I saw a beautiful leaf on the ground. Okay. And I just got my mind totally went off my book because I was obsessing about this idea. And I started looking at how beautiful this leaf was. And then it was like, it just entered my mind looking at this leaf. He's not the good guy. He's the bad guy.
Really?
Yeah. Because I just freed up my creative mind because I
Right.
just released it. And so he's actually a family man, former hitman for the mafia. So former hitman for the mafia turned family man, and now he's called back for one final job.
Wow. Okay. He was about to turn over a new leaf, and that's
Yeah, he had actually turned over a new leaf for a few years, and then they came after him, and they basically, it's either do this job or your family's in danger.
You become an accountant, right?
Yeah, accountant, because accountants, are so straight arrow. I can say that I have a little bit of my background.
An accountant with the vault in the ground.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask each of you, because you're now both doing this full time. What is when you look back at it, what is the thing you did or the advice that you would offer to either a writer or a designer, creative marketing person, to actually transition from the passion job on the side to full time? What do you think? What would you offer advice on that?
There has to be a balance between, well, first of all, they have to view it as a business because it is a business. But the second part of it is you have to have fun with it.
Okay.
Because if you're not having fun with it, you're gonna eventually just like burn out, give up, or whatever. It's not an easy process to get a book to publish to the publishing point. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of sacrifice. So that would be my advice: keep it fun and keep it professional.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think too, like when it comes to my side of it, it was knowing that I want this to be what I do for the rest of my life. I don't want to have to go back and work for somebody else. I want to continue on with this, and my whole goal has been to take what Carolyn creates that is an amazing story and make it so that it presents that way. And whether her book is sitting beside another author from the top 5 trad market, they look the same. You get the same reading experience, whether you've stopped reading this guy's book and you picked up Carolyn's book. It's the same flow and the same experience, so that you keep those. Once you get a customer to buy a book, they keep buying more. Because that's like with the series, that's the part you're always after. You get that first foot in the door, and then they come back and they buy more, and they buy more, and then they become that fan that is constantly waiting for the next one.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. It was informative, inspiring, and a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that was a great conversation with Carolyn and George. I really enjoyed the dynamics between the two of them. I mean, it was fun to see how they had to, they worked together, they gave up their day jobs at different times, and how the collaboration in the publishing of Carolyn's novels, how that sort of happened in a very organic way over time. And one of the things from the conversation that I want to reflect on is related to something Carolyn pointed out. I had suggested that Carolyn was the creative person and George was the logistics person. And Carolyn said he's very creative. And that reminded me of the fact that creativity in business and creativity in marketing can be just as important as the creativity in the actual creation of the fictional worlds. And that's a really interesting thing to consider. So you as an author, whether you have a partner like Carolyn and George have that partnership, or whether you are the sole creator and you're contracting out work, or you're collaborating with different people, or you're doing it yourself, there's a creativity in crafting the worlds that you're creating and the writing craft itself. But then there's a different kind of creativity in the actual business of writing and the actual marketing that you do for that product. It is just as important and just as valuable. And I was glad that I had a chance to chat with Carolyn and George about that, because it reminded me of the value of the whole picture, not just the creative work or not just the marketing or the business, but the value of looking at it as a whole. Well, that's it for my reflection on this particular interview. I wanted to pause and say thank you to folks who left comments on the podcast. So on episode 74, Prananthi said, "Congratulations, Mark. Beautiful and touching intro. This week's episode, for perspective from all the guys in last week's, really resonated. Wishing you best wishes moving forward with your marriage." Thanks, Prananthi. Appreciate that. That was great. I'm glad you enjoyed both the update from the conference, the panel discussion that I shared, and also for humoring me in that really long introduction, the personal update that I offered in last week's episode. And Georgia said, "Huge congratulations to you both. I loved listening to your proposal, Mark. That was cool. Enjoyable episode 2. Very inspiring." So, Georgia, thank you. Glad I could inspire you, hopefully with not, the business of writing and publishing that we talked about, but also the personal inspiration. Thank you, Prananthi and Georgia, for your comments. And thanks to all folks who comment and at me, at Mark Leslie on Twitter, as well as those who support the podcast over on patreon.com. The time that you take in leaving comments or in sponsoring the show through patreon.com/starkreflections means a lot to me. It means that there's a community out there of people who value the content enough to comment on it, enough to share it with friends, enough to leave reviews, enough to support it on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. Again, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre coming to you from my hotel room in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where the audio is not quite up to par, and I'm hoping to have that back for you in a proper way next week when you join me, hopefully, in episode 76 of the Stark Reflections podcast. And so, until next week and next episode, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.